I don't think for myself I've ever realized how gruesome this MAID program really is and its relation to other sectors that I, I haven't even really gone into it because there's so much of the news going on. There's so much chaos happening around us that something like this, it shocks me and it scares me to know that this is kind of the direction or the intention of where governments, where the ruling class, where people, and we've seen, how gruesome the MAID program is, how they're expanding the circumstances to allow basically anybody at this point. It used to be, and the whole intent of having medically assisted, self-deletion was for only certain circumstances. If you're on your deathbed or whatnot, then you can opt out for that. But now they've just expanded and ballooned this program into the worst case scenario, and it's just become so gruesome. It's become so gruesome that I don't think we've ever really sat down, even on this channel here, to have a full discussion on just how gruesome this gets. And it's because I've seen articles like this. So this is the Ottawa Citizen. This is from 2020. And this was an article about the benefits of all the people that are lining up for medically assisted self-deletion. And here it says, medically assisted deaths prove a growing boon to organ donation in Ontario. So just like how the CBC told people that you should be celebratory that more people are opting up to basically blank themselves, it's great because we're saving money on healthcare. We're saving millions out of the healthcare system, and now it looks like all the organs of a person can then be harvested and sold elsewhere around the world. That people, that we're supposed to look at this as a good thing. That's great. More and more people are lining up to self-delete themselves, and it's good for the business side of things. It's good for the economy, because now we're not spending money on healthcare. We're not spending money on, actually maintaining civilization, as they're using the excuse of saying the world is underpopulated, and that's why we got to have more migrants pour into Canada. We're very underpopulated. There's not enough people creating babies and making families. Well, here, you're basically encouraging this self-deletion program onto people because you're saying how great it is. It's so gruesome. It really is so diabolically gruesome. And here's another instance back from 2019. And I don't think I even saw this because they try to keep it under the rug for so long. Nova Scotia became the first in North America with presumed consent for organ donation. Province will take 12 to 18 months after bill passes to prepare for changes. So what that means is that it used to be you had to register if you wanted to be an organ donor. And usually it was with your renewable health card. It would give you a contact form, and there would be a check thing at the bottom that says, do you consent to being an organ donor? And you say yes or no. You check it off, you send it in the mail, or you give it to your Service Ontario, in this case, Service Nova Scotia. You give it to them, you give it to your provincial government, and that's how you consent. But now, this gives the government to pre-assume consent to harvest your organs. This is the government violating you. You as an individual. You don't have choice at this point. They're basically saying you're up for grabs if something happens to you. That's crazy. Cindy Ryan. So the article says Cindy Ryan knows to the day how long it's been since her life changed thanks to an organ donation, and what would change has allowed her to experience. My 50th birthday celebrated in hospital, and a few more since the Westville, Nova Scotia resident. My daughter became vice principal. My son graduating from St. FX. I don't know what that is. My stepdaughter becoming a nurse. My grandson starting high school. My first date with a man who is now my husband. And our wedding, which gave me another son and granddaughter. The list goes on and on. In fact, it's 1,979 days long and counting. Ryan was on my hand Tuesday in Nova Scotia's premier legislating that will make the province the first jurisdiction in North America to have presumed consent for organ and tissue donation. People will be able to opt out of donating their organs, but the onus will be on them to do so once the bill is proclaimed. So they're not even going to tell you if you're an organ donor. That's the thing. So we went from asking for your consent and you having to check off a box if you're renewing your health card or dealing with government offices. It used to be that way. Now the government's just enforcing this. That they're giving themselves the green light to harvest your organs. They're giving the green light for themselves. And that, we gave you the choice. You're allowed to opt out, but we're not going to tell you that you can opt out. Because a lot of people have not seen this article. I didn't see this article. 19 people will be able to opt out for donating their organs, but it's on them to do so once the bill is proclaimed. The bill will not apply to people younger than 19 or those who don't have the ability to consent for themselves. So that's at least the ground lining. That's at least the line they've drawn, that they're not going to go after people younger than 19. That's good. That, children can't consent, and it's wrong for the government to do that. That seems appropriate. I mean, this seems crazy, but it seems kind of, at least there's that. But it's getting worse. Canada's turning its assisted self-deletion, I can't even say the word on YouTube here, assisted self-deletion regime into an organ donation supply chain. Ethicists have warned that harvesting organs from euthanasian patients could result in pressuring people to opt for death so that their organs can be used by others with better prognosis. That is kind of scary. And given where we are right now in 2025 with the MAID program, with the amount of overdoses that are happening, with the amount of mental illnesses, with the amount of gun violence there is out there, with the ongoing AI transformation to the point that government oligarchs and corporations and private equity business lynchmen will look at you and say they don't need you anymore, that you become a useless eater. That's not my terms. That's what the WEF refers you to. You're a useless eater. So given the direction of where our future is heading towards, that is dark. That is scary. That is gruesome. And this is becoming more and more reality because they want to pick apart you. You are basically a guinea pig to the oligarchy. You're a guinea pig to the ruling class. They don't give a damn about you. They don't care about your life. They don't care about your health. They don't care about your safety, your security, your happiness, your liberty. They don't care about any of that. In fact, that's kind of the point of where we are right now. Is all intentional to basically kill off the economy, crush society, and then reinvent society in their image. That's what Mark Carney's doing. That's why we're in this direction. That's why the GDP is falling. That's why the Canadian dollar is falling. That's why jobs are being misplaced. That's why there's a high unemployment. They are completely gutting out the very essence, the very stronghold of what kept this country together for so long and remanufacturing it in their direction, in their favorability. And a lot of that does not involve you. You are basically worthless to them. And this is how they're treating you, as worthless. They're saying, hey, once something happens to you, you're up for grabs. and we'll send it elsewhere around the world for a quick buck. We don't care. We don't care. So here is Angry Unicorn tweeted out this video. This is from Redacted, and they even covered this. Again, I it's one of those things that we should have had a more serious conversation, but with everything that was going on, I felt like they almost tried to make it so it's not that obvious, so that people could not speculate and question and comment on this. So this is what Redacted said.
Ethical Rubicon by harvesting organs from assisted suicide. This is Canada's MAID program. We've been talking about it for years. Recently, the first heart transplant was transplanted from a euthanized person into a 59-year-old American man with heart failure. Now, this is not the first organ that was harvested from the MAID program, but it is the first heart. Now, we're going to get to...
So a heart was transferred from Alberta, Canada, to a man in America. What? Wait a second. Why is organ donations being transferred to other countries? Why are we sending a donation to an American man? Don't we? Is there not patients within our country that need the donation? Why is it going directly to an American person? That seems kind of suspicious.
All of the many ethical issues in a second. But first, one of them is national. How did an American man get access to this heart? Well, according to reports, the organs are supposed to be allocated to a wait list and supposed to go first to patients in Ontario and then wider Canada before it can be offered to the US. So are you telling me that no other Canadian needed a heart? That this person volunteered to donate their heart and it went across American borders because there's no one in Canada who needed this? Well, that sounds statistically improbable, doesn't it? Canada has hundreds of patients on the cardiac transplant wait list at any time, according to the Canadian Institute for Health Information. As of late last year, about 190 Canadians were waiting for a heart transplant. So if I were Canadian, I would be very curious how an American skipped the line, wouldn't you? Hearts are extremely scarce. Recipients wait years for a transplant. So for this heart to have not been needed by a single Canadian, that's strange. That sounds strange to me. It doesn't sound right. Now think about the timing of this. This is also very concerning. The patient is told, hey, someone's willing to die for you and give you their heart, so you got to get your butt into surgery at the same time this person's dying, and you accept that. Ethical quandary. Yep, okay, I'm going to take it. Now look how they report this timing. They say that within 7 minutes of death, the team said, yep, that person's dead. We're all good. They carve him up. They have the heart transplanted across the border. 6 hours later in Pennsylvania, that heart's put into a new person. Now, I don't know about medical practices in Canada, but this short period of time, 7 minutes, gives me pause, especially after in America, HHS Director RFK Jr. released this report in July showing that U.S. hospitals have been harvesting organs from patients who were, in the words of Monty Python, not dead yet. This is that report. It showed that in the hundreds of cases that HHS reviewed of organ donations, nearly 1/3 of the patients were not fully dead yet when they started taking the organs. They showed, quote, neurological signs incompatible with organ donation. In other words, still alive. Now, we don't know if this is done in Canada, but it sure would give me pause if I had been signed up to be carved up for MAID. Harvesting of MAID organs is called ODE. It stands for Organ Donation After Euthanasia. And not surprisingly, Canada is a leader of ODE. A Dutch study indicated that of 286 instances leading up to MAID in 2021, 136 of them were Canadian. This was before MAID even got off the ground, before it was popular in 2021. And it is popular now. According to this official report from 2023, about 4.7% of Canadians who died in that given year died from MAID. That's, you guys, 1 in 21 deaths in Canada is from MAID.
That's insane.
1 in 21. These are
1 in 21 deaths in this country are from MAID. 1 in 21. That is insane. That is self-deletion of the nation. That, to me, it's almost reminiscent of Jonestown, if you will. And if people remember that story of the 1970s, the cults that Jim Jones, the pastor from California, went to South America, created this, fictitious village that was supposed to be a paradise, and then everyone basically themselves at the end when they were getting investigated. That's what we're seeing right now in Canada. And people will make the argument, well, Jay, they're voluntarily, deleting themselves. They're voluntarily dying for someone in need. That's very Canadian of us to be this generous. Really? It's very generous of us to kill off our population. It's very generous of us to kill ourselves Allow for the government to harvest our organs and give it to the highest bidder. That's insane. That is insane. And coming after the fact that we did the investigation about blood donations being sold off to private donors and private equity, and how businesses are trying to transfer and make a profit off this donation that's supposed to go to people in need. It's gruesome. It's gruesome. It's horrific. It's satanic. If I could use that word, satanic. Like, the government's giving themselves access to take their mealy hands, grab your organs, even if you're not fully dead yet. Just rip apart you and sell it off. How is that possible? How is that not conflicting? How does that not piss you off as a Canadian? That at any point in time, the Canadian government can do this. And we know how conflicting of interest the MAID program has been. We know that living people are being registered onto MAID. There's people that had vaccine injuries that are lined up to MAID. We talked about Kayla Pollock, for example. She was told to take MAID because of a vaccine injury that the Canadian government is refusing to deal with. We know that there's veterans that are in need of assistance, that one of them being a colonel who served terms in Iraq and Afghanistan, and all they needed was a stair lift. All they needed was a $100 stair lift, and she was willing to raise the money herself because the veterans assistance wasn't going to give her a buck. So she was willing to raise the money herself and get donations to get a stair lift installed into her house so she can have access and movement and mobility. And the Canadian government just said, hey, have you tried MAID? Like, it's insulting. It's literally insulting to be a citizen of this country, to pay your tax dollars, and this is the respect you get from the government? That you're basically so useless. But we're going to chop you off and sell off your organs to the highest bidder around the world, apparently. It's not going to Ontario. It's not going to anywhere else in the country. So we'll just send it to America. We'll send it to, Latin America. We'll send it off to the Middle East. Someone will buy a new heart. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It really just makes me sick and devastating. And I'm shocked. I'm shocked at myself that I didn't pick up on this at the time. But again, a lot of things are happening at the same time, and they were trying to, I felt, they're releasing these articles, but it wasn't made public. And that was probably intentional so that they can do cover damage to say, well, we told you. It's not our fault that you didn't read the articles. It's not our fault that we didn't make it mainstream. It's not our fault. We just keep talking about Donald Trump and his tweets and celebrity news and gossip. We didn't tell you that, by the way, the government is ripping you apart and selling bits and pieces of you for profit. And you're now obligated to be part of this human organ diabolical donation process, which is not really a donation if the government is forcing you to do it. That's not a donation, that's confiscation. The same way they're taking your guns and selling it off to Ukraine, that's not donating it. Donating it means I personally give up something and give it to someone else. That is not a donation, that's confiscation, what the government is doing. So they're confiscating your organs and sending it elsewhere. That's crazy. Unbelievable that this is happening. And, they try to make the argument, that was back in 2019, that article from the CBC about, well, people under 19 have the saving grace. But remember this? I think we showed this before. I just want to highlight this again. This is a MAID pamphlet given to high schoolers. I kid you not. High schoolers are given this pamphlet about medically assisted death. You're gonna give a medically assisted death pamphlet to a bunch of hormonal, emotional teenagers. That is disaster. That is insane. That should be illegal. I don't know who did this. This was in Manitoba. I know where the picture came from, but whoever gave out these pamphlets should be arrested. You're giving out pamphlets to emotionally stunted teenagers that are dealing with puberty, that are dealing with anxiety, that already have significant emotions and mental capacities and dramas and illnesses. You're going to give them a MAID pamphlet. What the hell is wrong with you? And it says MAID for children and teens. That's right. The MAID program that started off as a last resort for people that are seriously ill or injured on their deathbeds has now expanded to living children and teenagers. This is a death cult, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I said it's very alluring to what I've learned about Jonestown back in the 1970s, reading about that. It's crazy. So, in this pamphlet, you can see a special committee of MPs and senators are studying MAID as recommended, allowing MAID for mature minors. What the hell? What mature minors? What the hell is that? Because at that age, your brain is not fully developed. At that age, you're going through puberty. You're going through depression. You're going through anxiety. I should know. I was once a teenager. I was in high school once. It's a roller coaster. You're giving a MAID pamphlet to a mature minor. Are you kidding me? A mature minor is a child or teen who is deemed capable of making a decision for MAID. How is this allowed? How is this allowed? How is this allowed by the jurisdiction of this country? I'm just stunned. It's speechless. This would essentially remove the minimum age of eligibility. The committee also suggested parents may not be consulted and wouldn't need to consent their child's death via MAID. They're doing this behind parents' backs, parents and guardians' backs. How is the international court not, made Canada into a target? We know that the UN writes reports about Canada and the use of temporary foreign worker programs. We know that they targeted before. How has this not been targeted? How is this allowed? At the same time, they're trying to tell you that our country is so underpopulated that we need to bring in migrants. So think about that. You're sending pamphlets to teenagers and children, telling them to delete themselves, being part of this psychological warfare to force death upon them. At the same time, you're making an argument that Canada's underpopulated and you want to bring in more migrants. How sinister can you be to make that argument, to say that? How sinister that you are a person with the power and authority to make those decisions at the same time. How sinister that is. And here's MAID for mental illness. Again, they're giving it to teenagers. This is in a high school in Manitoba. MAID for mental illness is set to take effect in March of 2027. So, that next 2 years. Hopelessness and desire to end one's life can be a symptom of some mental illnesses. Many Canadians struggle with mental health. There are long wait lists for treatment and can be expensive. Yeah, so why are we not investing more into that? Why are we not trying to do everything we can to save people? Instead of doing the opposite. Instead of trying to kill them. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy. And again, given the circumstances of where the direction our country and the world and the Western world's going towards, this is sinister. It says 1 in 10 people will wait more than 4 months for counseling. The waiting period for MAID is only 3 months. So they're trying to make a silver lining in the fact that you don't have to wait. Instead of actually having the time to grieve and process your emotions and grow and develop as an adult, you just go and die. How insane this is. And it's related to all this. It's related to the organ donors. It's related to blood. And look at this. This is from the Globe and Mail. As death toll rises, opioid crisis makes more organs available for transplant. So I wonder why nothing's getting done about overdoses. I wonder why they're encouraging more people to become addicts. We're not helping them. We're not getting them to safe facilities and giving them treatments and rehab and actually building up upon them to be functioning people in society. We're not doing that. We're doing the exact opposite. We're creating more addicts. And this is probably why. Because eventually they're going to die and we can just take their organs. That's from the Globe and Mail. Here's some more. 1/4 of organs donated in BC in early 2017 came from people died of overdose. He died a hero. BC Transplant says drug overdose organ donation was part of it. So the more addicts they create, the more chances they have of those people dying off and then taking part of their bodies without their consent, without their acknowledgement, without any notification, not even parental consent. They can just take your organs and give it to the highest bidder. How dark, how disgusting that is. Like, this is beyond third world corruption. I don't even know what world you could say this is good. I don't know how anyone can look at this and think, oh, there's good factors to this. Here's some more of it. Someone did a online search about it. Here's Washington Post. A cruel harvest of the poor. Israeli allegedly behind human organ transfers. Kosovo organ trafficking caused surgeon bailed in Turkey. So all this is doing, it's gone international. And again, it's not a donation if the government is forcing you to become a donor, harvesting your organs, and then selling it off internationally to the highest bidder. That's not what a donation is. A donation is you as an individual saying that you want to donate, say, a part of your kidney or liver or whatever the case may be, to a specific individual that you gave the consent. Not the government, you. So this is not donation, this is confiscation. And here's this guy, Sean Ricard, saying MAID has become an extremely profitable business of our government due to the fact mandatory organ donation is a condition for being approved, resulting in Canada now being listed as a global leader in assisted deaths of its citizens. That's supposed to be a thing we're proud of? That's the thing I'm supposed to be proud of as a Canadian. We're the top leaders of assisted deaths. That we're medically inducing self-deletion to our population. That we're not helping people. We're not taking our tax dollars and investing into Canadians. That we're doing this. I'm supposed to feel proud about this. Wow. And now this, this is clearly, they're having these conversations in the House of Commons. Can a baby consent to assisted suicide? Or I guess self-deletion. I can't even say the word. Canada expands assisted self-deletion laws to allow for killing of infants for profit. I kid you not. Here's the conversation. This guy here, Louis Roy Witness, here he is going to have this conversation of whether a baby can be confiscated by the government to use for organ donation. Listen to this.
Minors from 14 to 7 years of age, nearly 18, the committee recommends, and the board of directors supports as well, that these minors could, with their tutors or parental parent, could make a request for MAID based on the level of persistent and intolerable suffering that they may experience and become unmanageable and senseless. The same for babies from 0 to 1 years of age who are born with severe deformations, very grave and severe syndromes, medical syndromes, whose life expectancy and level of suffering are such that it would make sense to ensure that they do not suffer, given that their possibility of surviving is basically nil. And this is something that has been used in the Netherlands as an argument, and we could explore that option. Finally, the committee addressed the issue of elders who are feeling, tired of being alive. Sometimes what we in geriatric care call, sliding into existential suffering or emptiness, who's are very fragile, whose physical abilities are so debilitated that the very fact that they're still alive becomes a real strain on them. So we feel that this is a topic that's a sensitive one, of course. People in general aren't quite sure how.
Sensitive topic, which is why we are not informing our own citizens that they're passing legislation to allow this. It's a sensitive subject to take your citizens' lives, to literally kill off your population. Yeah, it's a sensitive subject. That's why we're not going to tell anybody and pass this legislation without Canadians knowing about this. Oh my God. It honestly makes me sick. They're talking about newborn infants. Oh, well, we can somewhat get consent to have a newborn be part of the MAID program. Or, the elderly person that just is tired of living and just has no use in our society. We should just, send them away. Wow. This is dark. This is diabolical. This is not Canadian. This is not, liberal. This is not conservative. I don't know what this is. This is like globalized satanic rituals we're witnessing here. This is a death cult. That you're going to kill off part of your population that you're deemed is not helpful or has circumstances that we believe won't be suitable for our society. At the same time, they're bringing in more migrants because we're running low on our population. There's not enough newborn babies. There's not enough people producing people. The reproduction rate in our country is stagnant. So, as they're bringing in more migrants, they're then killing off more and more people through MAID. How does that make sense? How does that make sense? Unless you're some sort of diabolical, villainous, evil monster. How does that make sense? And how does it make sense that a donation is being done by the government confiscating your consent to be an organ donor? I don't see why there was a problem beforehand that people made their decision. on whether or not to donate their organs. That's what it means to donate something. You give consent as an individual to another person to take a part of you. That's done by two individuals. That's not part of the government's decision. But the government is interfering to say, you no longer have a choice. And then they try to give legal way to say, well, you could opt out, but we're not going to tell you how to do that, because obviously it's good for business. It's good for them. It's good for their insidious agenda. How crazy that is. How criminalizing that is. And maybe that's why I haven't, dove into the subject matter, because it infuriates me that this goes on. It's infuriating. It's sickening. It's disgusting. It breaks my heart. It completely, just absolutely insidious what is happening. And given the direction of where things are going, this is not silver lining news. This is not great. This is not a proud moment for our country. And, I just listed off, high unemployment, that the AI transformation, that more and more people are becoming addicts. Like, this is all leading into this direction. That more and more people are going to be part of the MAID program, that they're going to harvest the organs off to the highest bidder. How, absolutely insane. And I don't understand how the UN or the ICC or whatever the case, how anyone can look at this and tolerate it and not have a criminal conviction against it. How they're allowed to give pamphlets to teenagers and middle schoolers to say that they can get consent because you're a mature minor, whatever the hell that is. That's insane. Absolutely insane.